Welcome back to LexTalk podcast listeners. You're tuning into Season 1, Episode 8. And today, we're diving deep
into a topic.
I think
a lot of us struggle with.
A lot of us struggle with, speaking with confidence. Specifically, we're going to be looking at tips for confident English speaking. Especially for Thai learners.
And we've got a great stack of sources to help us unpack this.
Yeah.
A couple of YouTube videos, Become a Confident English Speaker, and Speak with Confidence. Thai students speak English well.
Okay.
Plus some documents on building confidence in Thai classrooms.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So the first thing that really struck me was this idea that confidence isn't some magical trait you're born with.
Right.
It's a skill.
It is.
Something you can actually learn and develop over time.
You can learn it.
Yeah, and both videos
Yes.
really hammered that home.
Both videos really hammered that home. What's so fascinating is how they both use the highlight reel analogy. Think about it. We tend to only see the end product, the polished speaker effortlessly commanding a room.
Right.
But what we don't see are the hours, the days, even years of practice. And yes, even setbacks that got them there.
It's so easy to fall into that trap of thinking, oh, they're just naturally confident.
Absolutely.
But the truth is, everyone starts somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's actually really encouraging, especially for those of us who might identify as introverts.
Absolutely. And speaking of introverts, Become a Confident English Speaker actually dedicates a good chunk of time to addressing how introversion can actually be an asset in communication. That tendency to think before you speak it can be a real superpower.
You know, it's funny because I've always thought of myself as a thinker, not a talker.
Right.
But this video reframed it in such a positive way.
Okay.
It's like instead of seeing it as a weakness, I can now see it as a strength. It helps me choose my words carefully and craft my message with more intention.
Exactly. And this ties in nicely with another myth that these videos debunk. The idea that speaking fast equals fluency.
Oh my gosh, yes, that whole fast talker stereotype.
Yes.
I remember watching Anne-Marie in Become a Confident English Speaker trying to speak super fast.
Oh, yeah.
And it just ended up a jumbled mess.
It was hilarious.
But also such a good illustration of how speed without clarity is just noise.
It's just noise. And it brings us to a surprising but incredibly powerful tool for confident speaking pauses.
Pauses, I always thought those were a sign of hesitation or uncertainty.
It seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
But strategic pauses can actually make you a more effective and confident communicator.
Interesting.
They give you a moment to breathe, gather your thoughts, and emphasize key points.
So it's not just about filling every silence with words.
Exactly. And they benefit the listener, too, by giving them time to process what you're saying. The videos even offer specific techniques, pausing between thoughts, before important words, or at the end of a sentence for emphasis.
That's really helpful. It's like instead of seeing pauses as a weakness, we can actually use them to our advantage.
Precisely. And here's another game changer, that the videos emphasize asking for clarification is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of confidence.
That's so reassuring to hear. I always feel a bit awkward asking someone to repeat themselves like I should have understood the first time.
It's a common feeling, but think about it from the other person's perspective.
Yeah.
They'd much rather you ask for clarification than pretend you understand when you don't.
Okay.
It shows you're engaged and genuinely interested in what they have to say.
That's a good point. And Become a Confident English Speaker actually gives some user-friendly phrases, too.
They do.
Like, sorry, I didn't quite catch that, or would you mind repeating what you said? Having those ready to go definitely takes the pressure off.
Absolutely. And it leads us to another important aspect of speaking with confidence. Dealing with setbacks.
Because let's face it, we're all human and we're all going to make mistakes, even those naturally confident speakers we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. Remember, what you're seeing is their highlight reel, not their blooper reel.
Right.
But what truly sets confident speakers apart is how they handle those moments when they stumble.
And that's where those practical tips come in, right? Like taking a deep breath, finding an alternative word, or simply acknowledging the mistake and moving on.
You got it. Become a Confident English Speaker has this great anecdote where Anne-Marie forgets the word journal in the middle of a presentation.
Oh.
It was so relatable because we've all been there, right?
Yeah.
But what I loved is how she emphasized the importance of having those strategies in your back pocket so you can regain control when those brain fart moments happen.
Okay, so we've talked about the myths surrounding confidence, the power of pauses, and the importance of asking for clarification.
Yeah.
We've also touched on how to handle those inevitable setbacks. But what I'm really curious about is how all of this applies specifically to Thai learners of English.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's where the cultural context becomes really important.
Right.
We have this document on building confidence in Thai classrooms, and it specifically addresses the concept of saving face.
And I think for a lot of our listeners who aren't familiar with that term, it might help to explain exactly what it means.
Absolutely. Saving face is a deeply ingrained cultural value in many Asian cultures, including Thailand. It essentially refers to the importance of maintaining one's reputation, dignity, and social standing.
So it's about avoiding embarrassment or shame, both for yourself and for others.
Exactly. And in a learning environment, this can sometimes create a fear of making mistakes, which, as we've discussed, can be a real barrier to building confidence in speaking.
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
I can see how, in a culture that values harmony and respect so highly, the idea of speaking up, especially in a foreign language, might feel really intimidating.
It's not just about the language itself, either. The document highlights how foreign teachers play a vital role in fostering a safe and supportive classroom environment where learners feel comfortable taking risks and making mistakes.
So it's about creating a space where those setbacks we talked about earlier are seen as learning opportunities rather than personal failures.
Precisely. And it's not just about correcting grammar or pronunciation, it's about encouraging genuine communication and helping learners develop their own voice and style.
That reminds me of something we saw in the YouTube video. Speak with confidence, Thai students. Speak English.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about tips for speaking. It was about the broader impact of education and mentorship on building confidence.
I think you're referring to Teacher Abby's message about how education can empower individuals to become successful and contributing members of society.
Exactly. It's a reminder that learning English isn't just about mastering the language itself. It's about opening doors to new opportunities and expanding your horizons.
And Teacher Abby also touched on the importance of finding ways to become a good person in society, which ties back to that cultural emphasis on saving face. It's about using your language skills not just for personal gain, but also to make a positive contribution to your community.
Okay, so we've talked about the cultural context and how saving face can impact language learning. But what about some more concrete steps learners can take to build their confidence? The videos and documents offered a ton of practical advice, right?
Absolutely. And what I love is that there's something for everyone, regardless of your personality or learning style.
So for our listeners who thrive in social settings, joining an English-speaking community could be a great option.
Exactly. Whether it's online or in person, having those opportunities to practice in a supportive environment can be incredibly beneficial. And for those who prefer a more structured approach, finding a language partner or tutor could be a great way to get personalized feedback and guidance.
And for our listeners who are maybe a bit shy or introverted, something as simple as talking to yourself in English can be surprisingly effective.
You'd be surprised how much it helps with fluency and pronunciation. And don't underestimate the power of reading aloud, too. It's a great way to get comfortable with the rhythm and flow of the language.
Become a confident English speaker. Also mention Toastmasters, which is an organization specifically focused on public speaking that could be a fantastic resource for anyone looking to really hone their presentation skills.
Absolutely. And it's not just about standing on a stage and giving a speech. Toastmasters provides a structured environment for practicing everything from impromptu speaking to storytelling to delivering effective feedback.
Okay, so there are tons of options for practicing and building confidence. But I think it's important to acknowledge that it's not always going to be easy. There will be times when you feel discouraged or frustrated. What advice do our sources have for navigating those challenges?
One of the biggest pitfalls I see learners fall into is the comparison trap. They start comparing themselves to native speakers or more fluent peers and feel inadequate.
Oh, for sure. It's so easy to get caught up in that negative self-talk, like, I'll never be able to speak as fluently as them, or my accent is too strong.
But remember, you're comparing your beginning to someone else's middle or even end. Everyone learns at their own pace. And the key is to focus on your own progress, not someone else's.
Another thing I've noticed is that fear of making mistakes can really paralyze some learners. They're so worried about getting it wrong that they end up not speaking at all.
Perfectionism can be a real confidence killer. But here's the thing, making mistakes is an essential part of the learning process. It's how we grow and improve.
I love how Become a Confident English Speaker frames mistakes as setbacks rather than failures. It just sounds so much less daunting.
It's a great reframing, and the video emphasizes the importance of finding a safe space to practice where you feel comfortable experimenting, making mistakes, and learning from them without judgment.
Whether that's an English-speaking community, a language exchange partner, or even just talking to yourself in the mirror, the keys to create that space where you can let go of that fear of judgment and just focus on practicing and improving.
And building on that, it's also crucial to be patient with yourself. Learning a language takes time and effort, and it's not a linear process. There will be ups and downs, moments of frustration, and times when you feel like you're not making any progress.
It's like learning any new skill, right? Some days you nail it, other days you feel like you're back at square one.
Yeah.
But the key is to keep going, keep practicing, and celebrate those small wins along the way.
Absolutely. And remember, the goal isn't to be perfect. It's to be able to communicate effectively and confidently. And that comes with practice, perseverance, and a healthy dose of self-compassion.
Okay. I think we've covered a lot of valuable ground here, but I want to circle back to something that's come up a few times throughout our conversation, this idea of saving face and how it can influence language learning.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's a really important aspect to consider, especially for Thai learners.
We've talked about how it can sometimes create a fear of making mistakes, but I'm curious about how it might also influence the design of English learning environments themselves.
That's an excellent point, and it really highlights the need for cultural sensitivity in language teaching from a teacher's perspective. It's crucial to create a classroom environment that feels safe and supportive, where mistakes are seen as learning opportunities rather than sources of embarrassment.
So it's about fostering a culture of encouragement and positive reinforcement rather than criticism and judgment.
Precisely. And for learners, it's about finding ways to gradually step outside their comfort zones, starting with low-risk speaking activities like pair work or structured dialogues.
And then gradually building up to more challenging tasks like group discussions or presentations.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between respecting cultural norms and pushing yourself to grow and develop your language skills.
And I think it's important to remember that saving face isn't just about avoiding embarrassment. It's also about maintaining harmony and showing respect for others. And that can be a really beautiful thing.
Absolutely. It's about finding ways to communicate confidently and effectively while still being mindful of the social context and the feelings of those around you.
I think what's really fascinating here is that while our focus today has been on speaking with confidence in English, many of these principles and strategies can be applied to any language or communication context.
That's such an important point. The principles of effective communication transcend language barriers, whether you're speaking English, Thai, or any other language. The core concepts of clarity, intention, and respect remain essential.
And what I love about these sources is that they give us so many practical tools and techniques to develop those skills, from understanding the power of pauses to reframing setbacks as learning opportunities, to finding a supportive community to practice with. There's literally something for everyone.
And it all boils down to this: confidence in speaking is a skill, not a trait. It's something you cultivate through practice, perseverance, and a willingness to embrace the learning process with all its glorious imperfections.
And speaking of practice, we'd love to hear from our listeners. What stood out to you from this deep dive? Which tip resonated most? And what's your first step going to be on your journey to confident speaking? Share in the comments below.
We're all in this together, and remember, confident speaking isn't about being perfect. It's about being authentic, engaging, and connected.
And it's about having the courage to use your voice, even when you're nervous, because what you have to say matters.
So true. So often, we let fear hold us back from sharing our ideas or stories or perspectives, but when we find that confidence to speak up, we not only empower ourselves, but we also enrich the world around us.
I love that. Okay, so to wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. How might the concept of saving face, which we explored in the context of Thai culture, apply to other cultures and communication styles? Is it something that's unique to Asian cultures, or is it a more universal human experience, food for thought?
That's a fantastic question to ponder, and it reminds us that communication is always a two-way street. It's about understanding not just our own perspectives and intentions, but also the cultural norms and values of those we're communicating with.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into speaking with confidence. A huge thank you to our expert for sharing their insights. And to all of you listening, remember, confidence is a skill you can develop, and it all starts with taking that first step.
Keep practicing, keep learning, and keep believing in yourself. You've got this.
Don't forget to follow LexTalk on all platforms. Our website, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, SoundCloud, and Spotify.
At LexTalk Podcast.
Let's talk. Let's learn.
Let's Lex Talk.